the beautiful Earth, but from a distance, it's easy to forget that catastrophes, disasters, and tragedies lie beneath what looks like a beautiful and tranquil face.
Hi, I'm Klein, author of prophecy books and videos. Though men use all kinds of scientific devices, technological devices to gain early warnings for these kinds of disasters, it's still almost impossible to predict when they'll arrive. But what if you could know the future? What if you could know the coming of a catastrophic event or a disaster? But what if it was of an entirely different nature? What if it was man-made?
The very heart of Western civilization is electrical power. But what if America suffered a heart seizure and the centralized national power grid failed? Even though our national system is interconnected, which makes for more efficient use, when something goes wrong, it can cascade through the whole system. The lights of our great cities would go out. Today's banks have provided what seems to be almost unlimited access to cheap loans. This in turn has created highly leveraged investing into the stock market and the greatest bull market in American history. People everywhere are trying to cash in using their credit cards to invest. Will we see a repeat of the 1929 bank failure and stock market crash? What if for some reason the banks fail? We have safeguards, right? But on a banking system that runs on fractions of reserves, FDIC insurance or not, we are all still at risk. All of us. What about our freight and shipping industries? What if freight trains couldn't run and they couldn't deliver coal and wheat and the other bulk commodities? What if trucks couldn't run and consumer products couldn't be delivered? How long would it take for the supermarkets to be emptied? What could cause such a disaster? What if passengers and baggage couldn't be processed through airports? Planes could not be directed by air traffic controllers who are unable to do their jobs. And airlines simply couldn't fly and were shut down. What if telecommunications and information could not flow as satellites became inoperative? And military global positioning systems couldn't function, crippling our defense systems. Telephone service came to a standstill. Could we really make it without a flow of information? What if entitlement checks were frozen and people that depended upon those programs had to go without? What would happen to the inner cities? Would they implode?
Now try to imagine all these catastrophic events happening at once. I know you're thinking it's probably impossible, but it's true. We are facing a problem that we simply cannot understand. It's called the Millennium bug, and it's going to hit us in just a very short time. Now listen to the National Association State Information Resource Executives explain the problem.
What exactly is the year 2000 problem? How did it come about? How will it affect you? And what can be done about it? Let's begin by understanding what the problem is and the history behind it. The problem started with computer mainframes. They were and continue to be the heartbeat of thousands of both private corporations and public agencies. Years ago, computer hardware was expensive and bulky, taking up huge amounts of space. When computers first came into popular use, most of the systems operated using COBOL, a computer language written in the 1960s. And a new profession was born, that of the computer programmer. These savvy programmers worked hard to make computer systems as efficient and cost-effective as possible. Every keystroke was evaluated. Every byte of expensive storage was justified. So when it came to entering dates, the notion of a two-digit date field was heralded as brilliant. Given that dates might be replicated thousands of times in a single program, millions of dollars were saved. According to a recent study, as much as $16 to $20 million per megabyte of storage over 30 years. In the 60s, programmers weren't concerned about the year 2000. Technology was improving rapidly, and it seemed almost ludicrous that code written in 1965 would still be in use 30 years later. Meanwhile, governments and the private sector expanded and their computing needs grew, so new code was written and added to the old. Today, the legacy software systems are a patchwork of interconnected code, and the money-saving date standard has been incorporated and literally buried within millions of lines of this code. Ironically, the efficiency that has ensured the endurance of this code has created a monumental problem as we approach the new millennium. The date change issue affects all computing platforms, including mainframe, mid-range and desktop computers, building security and environmental control systems, and lab equipment. At first glance, the problem seems almost absurd. Because the International Standardized Date Code is based on 2 digits for the month, the day, and the year 2000 has to be entered as 00. What happens when the odometer turns over to read 00 in the year-date field? Computer systems that are not converted could respond by recalculating all data based on the incorrect interpretation that 00 stands for the year 1900. Or, unable to correctly interpret the date code, systems could actually fail to respond, locking up altogether. Suddenly, eligibility dates, expiration dates, and contract dates might be misread and miscalculated. One misunderstood date fed into the system creates a whole string of incorrect information fields as formulas gather the data and make calculations based on these inaccuracies. The computer will mistake 85-year-olds for 15-year-olds, and a whole generation of Social Security recipients won't receive their checks. Entire inventories would be dumped as automation reads expiration dates incorrectly. The doomsday scenarios are endless. The solution seems simple. Just rewrite the code so it can read 4-digit date fields. But computer applications of today, which have been modified through the years, do not lend themselves to the problem of fixing one string of code. The code is layered and interwoven in such an intricate way that tracking date codes is an investigative process, to say the least. Miscalculated data spreads quickly, creating a whole network of inaccuracies. It truly is like a virus, infecting systems via networks worldwide. The Meta Group provides year 2000 consultation for agencies and businesses throughout the nation.
The year 2000 problem, as we see it, is certainly global. If we make an assessment of what our customers are going to experience and have to put onto the year 2000 books in the next 2 to 3 years, it looks like it's about $600 billion worldwide. If we look at those costs within the United States, it's about $400 billion.
Many states and companies are already aggressively dealing with this dilemma. AT&T began addressing the issue in 1996.
We at AT&T have known the year 2000 was going to be a problem for a long time. We plan to finish the year 2000 project December 31st, 1998. The reason why we want to finish a year early is so that we have enough time to do some final testing, and if anything occurs during the project that elongates it, we have a year's worth of breathing room.
Each government agency must determine what is best for its unique set of circumstances.
Listen to how the state of Oregon is trying to deal with the problem. We're sitting here with Mike Zanin, who is the point man that's dealing with the year 2000 problem here in the state of Oregon, and we'll be talking with him in just a minute. But before we do, Mike, I just want to thank you for letting us come and visit with you so that we can learn more about this amazing problem we're all dealing with. Mike, what actually is it that you do for the state of Oregon concerning the year 2000 problem?
Ken, I'm currently serving as the state's Chief Information Officer for the state of Oregon. I have responsibility for statewide technology policy planning. And we established about a year and a half ago a year 2000 corporate office to try to facilitate correcting the year 2000 problem. First of all, the state has taken it very seriously. Again, when you have the governor's fingerprints on this particular issue, that gets people's attention. And that's probably one of the most critical things we can do right now, is to get people's attention that this affects all systems. It's not just a mainframe problem. It's not just a mid-range system. It affects all systems, and all of them need to be looked at to make sure that we can continue to operate and service the citizens beyond January 1st, year 2000. Yeah, I think it's important to note that this is not just a government problem. Every organization of every size that is reliant on computer technology potentially has this problem.
Such as banks and...
Especially banks and insurance companies. As a matter of fact, I gave you an article here this morning about somebody trying to use a Visa in an ATM machine down in Mexico, and because Visa was only using the last 2 digits 00 when the person stuck their Visa into the automatic teller machine, it got rejected as being a card that had already expired, because they did a calculation, 00 minus, July of 97 or August of 97, and they get a negative 97.
Amazing.
And all of a sudden the card is invalid.
So there's already problems beginning to develop.
Oh, very much so.
Let's suppose we have a company with 10 million lines of code, which would be rather small. I know Chase Manhattan has 200 million lines of code. What has to happen? A programmer has to be hired. He has to go in. Tell us the process that has to happen to fix the existing systems.
Well, there's basically 4 phases to any kind of a year 2000 fix. There's the inventory phase. First of all, you need to know how many computer systems do I have? PCs, mainframe, mid-range, and we're talking about stuff that's not even computer related. We're talking elevators, heating, ventilation systems, security systems, traffic signals. It goes beyond anything that uses a computerized date function that's embedded within it has to be looked at. And so, first of all, you have to do the inventory to find out how much technology that potentially is date dependent do we have. And that's a big effort. That most organizations don't have a firm grasp on how much technology they really have. The second is the assessment of the technology that I have, what needs to be fixed, and then what's the priority of fixing those. The third thing then would be the actual conversion. Go in and actually, after you've located all of the occurrences of date and the date functions, is to make the corrections to them. And there's 7 or 8 different methods one can use to actually fix that problem. But you have to go in and actually physically get into the code and make some changes.
Let's suppose Oregon gets all of its agency's computers fixed. There's a testing phase that has to happen to make sure that you're operating appropriately. When would that start, and how much time do you need to test all of those fixes?
And that brings me to the fourth point of a 4-point process that one has to go through. I mentioned the inventory, I mentioned the assessment, I mentioned the conversion. The last is testing. And again, the industry analysts suggest that testing takes anywhere from 60 to 70% of the total effort. I mean, it's one thing to fix your systems, it's another thing to make sure that they work and make sure beyond a shadow of a doubt. We've recommended to organizations that they plan to have their conversions done by January 1st, 1999. And that will give them a full year to do the testing necessary to make sure that their systems in fact work like they're supposed to when the clock strikes 1/1/2000.
Most people, and let me interrupt you for just a minute, think that all you have to do is find some software, shove it in the computer, and it automatically fixes it. But that's not the case here. It doesn't sound like that is the case here. It sounds like you have to go in, examine manually every line of code with some sort of tools, and then make the correction. Is that fair analysis?
Ken, let me say this. There is no silver bullet.
I want to thank the state of Oregon for their cooperation in helping us put together this important information. But what about a private consultant, a computer expert? Let's hear what he has to say about the year 2000 problem. Just how dependent have we become on computers? Listen to Bill Lancaster, a consultant to Fortune 500 companies, explain how a simple vacation can turn into a Millennium bug nightmare. Bill, could you please elaborate on just what you do as a technical consultant in layman's terms?
Certainly, Ken. For the last 20 years or so, I've been working with large and small companies, particularly focusing on Fortune 500 companies and helping them establish their strategic directions for the near term, 3 to 5 years.
Bill, as a technical consultant, why aren't you focused on the Y2K problem?
These days, technical consultants are dealing with issues, Ken, that are more focused on getting through today and tomorrow And most companies are not thinking about what's happening a year and a half, 2 years down the road. So unfortunately, a lot of companies are not looking out that far.
Bill, I'd like to talk specifically now about the millennial bug, the year 2000 problem in broad terms. Could you elaborate and give us some of your views on what you see out there?
Certainly. First, let me say I agree, it is a problem. In fact, it's probably the biggest crisis, the broadest scale crisis to hit the American business community since 1929. And that's mainly because of how pervasive the technology is in our everyday lives. Particularly, take for example the family going on vacation. If you're going to make a reservation at Disney World, you'll call up and somebody will pull up maybe a previous record that you would have on the computer. And then they'll take your credit card number, which will be processed via computer. And then maybe they'll ask you if you want to stay in a local hotel. Well, that will also be done on the computer. At each stage of the game, they're entering in key and significant dates as part of what they're putting in. Then they'll be maybe working with you to make an airline reservation, which is computerized. Then maybe they'll be working with you to make reservations for other activities in the local area, also on the computer. Then when you set out to actually have your vacation, you'll get in your car, you'll drive to the airport, maybe you'll get into a parking garage where they'll put your parking location on the computer, so if you lose your spot later, you can come back and say, "Where's my car?" They'll pull it up on the computer. You'll then go into the airport, you'll check in, that'll all be done on the computer. Now the boarding coupons, they're passed through a computer so that they can make sure that the person who is actually on is actually a ticketed person. Then you'll fly, and there's plenty of places where the aircraft itself will be tracked on computers. You'll land, that will all be done through computers. For example, if you're flying on a Boeing 777, that's a fly-by-wire, highly computer-controlled piece of equipment. You'll get into the airport. Again, you'll check your bags, or you'll pull your bags out of checking, and they'll have a barcode on them. They'll know exactly where they are at any point in time. You'll go rent a car, which is a computerized activity. You'll go check into your hotel, which is a computerized activity. And you see it goes on, even to the point of driving through a fast food outlet. Your order will be placed through a computer. It will be resolved through a computer. The amount of equipment that the fast food place uses will be controlled by computers. The amount of inventory that they take. So my point is that it's a very pervasive technology and not a simple thing to resolve, mainly because of how pervasive it is. You're dealing not just with one computer system that needs to be able to handle the year 2000, you're also dealing with many other companies that touch your one little activity, all involving computer systems. So that's why it's not an easy thing to resolve.
Do you see an easy fix to this problem?
No, Ken, there's no easy answer. The bottom line is that this is going to come down to people sitting at computers, typing in programs, testing them, making changes, testing again, and implementing them. The biggest problem associated with the year 2000 is the shortage of people that are capable and competent to do this kind of work. In fact, it's said that if every programmer in the world were to stop today doing what they're doing and they focused on the year 2000 problem, it would be completely finished in the year 2005.
David Jeffers is president of Fort Worth Technologies, which is a mainframe consulting and contracting company. They write, rewrite, and modify code on a daily basis, working with multi-million-dollar companies. They have a very clear understanding of the Millennium bug problem. I'm sitting with David Jeffers, who is the president of Fort Worth Technologies, and he's going to share with us some of his insights about the Millennium bug, the year 2000 problem, from somebody that works on it every day. You know, Dave, one of the things that I'm encountering when I'm out there, just talking to the layman like myself, I don't know very much about computers, is that they have this idea that, well, somebody will find the magic fix, the magic bullet. We have this presto changeo concept in our mind about how society runs, especially with computers. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that there's really no easy fix for this. This is a very complicated problem, even though it seems very simple at its core.
Right. That's a very, very popular belief out there, and you know, it's a very American belief that we will either come up with something very quickly, or that we'll be able to run a program on top of programs to automate this. And there are tools out there, and there are good tools out there. The tools that I've seen, the tools that we've worked with, have claimed to catch 60, I think the max is 70% of existing date fields out there. Well, I think that's purely up for speculation in the first place, how many of these codes are actually catching. They may catch the obvious codes, the very obvious ones that even me or you could sit down and look at and say, well, that's obviously a date code that needs to be changed. But the problem with these is even if you're missing, let's say 30, 40%, you're missing the hardest date fields to find, the most difficult ones to track, the most difficult date fields to follow through a logical conclusion. We have the human factor involved in all of this coding. You have literally millions of programmers out there over the past 20 to 25 years who've been writing code under non-standardized versions. They were more or less let to write the code on their own. And back in the 70s and the 80s, we were trying to compact code. That was one of our largest jobs was to find space. Space was at such a premium. Had we known it was so cheap today, we would have never done what we did. But we used compilers, we compact code, we threw out dates, we threw out 19s, we threw out ands, ifs, ors. Anything we could find, we were throwing out those dates. We were using programs, laying programs on top of programs to even do that back then. That is a problem, obviously, because you'll just have a string of code that'll be numerical, and it's very difficult to know unless you follow the whole line of code through that is literally a date code. There's different languages also, and all programmers write differently, all programmers code differently, and all programmers have different methodology. Really, our large mainframe shops don't have a standardized methodology.
It sounds to me like there's no possible way to create a uniform program to go in there and do this automatically. And I think that's what everybody's waiting for, is some kind of genius to step forward, create this amazing software that can go in there and have it all computerized, stick a disk in there, and boom, it's fixed. There's no way this is going to happen.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no way this is going to happen. Even if we had a program that we could find all of the current dates on, that would only be 40 to 50% of our problem. You still have to unit test everything as you're working the program, and it has to be fixed not only just in the mainframe code or the binary code, but it has to be followed to its conclusion of online. It has to be followed to documentations to your users who are viewing the screen. If you have added a digit and they're not viewing it on their digit, you're going to get an instant error code that we are unsure how that's going to react. Is that going to give you erroneous data? Is it going to corrupt other databases? So that's pretty serious. Each line of code has to be taken individually, and each date field has to be viewed individually, and it has to be resolved before you can move on to your next date code in your field you're in or the next field you're going to.
What do you think's going to happen here? Are we going to make it? Are we going to get hit with a tidal wave here? Tell us what your gut feeling is about what we should expect.
Well, I mean, we clearly are not going to make it if you were discussing with me making it in the stance of doing business today, doing business in the year 2000 or in 1999, because there's a few dates we're looking at, like we do today. We are clearly not going to make that. If we started today and there was total awareness and we were all being honest about the problem, could we make it through this without dire consequences? Absolutely, it's possible. That would mean though lopping off subsystems that we just can't get to taking a mission critical path, doing triage on the systems that we have right now, and going only to those necessary systems that we have to fix and replace, and starting to do that. Now that's possible. I don't think it's probable though. When we come to the fact that we know we won't finish, or that we have all these multiple problems out there, we will throw as many people at it as we can. We'll stop all current activity that we have in IT. We'll get those people on it on a second or third shift basis, and we will gather together and rally around, and we'll fix this problem. And the big problem with that is you got to sit where I sit to understand that can't happen. And the reason that can't happen is you've got a window of mainframe programmers out there that were working and actually doing code between the 70s and mid-90s, and we started moving to open systems, and we quit mainframe programming. Now, you know, the big joke in our industry was that you would be a dinosaur if you were a mainframe programmer in the 90s or into the year 2000. Open systems just became the prevalent thing to do, and every company started moving towards that, thinking we would roll the mainframes out. Problem is that people start moving their technology. Colleges stop graduating COBOL programmers. They even stop teaching COBOL in class. So you've got a handful of people out there. It's a definable amount of people who can actually do the code conversion, understand, and follow it to a logical conclusion. This problem will only be fixed by manpower. And if we can figure a way to add hours to the day, maybe we can get the manpower. But we're not even going second or third shift right now.
And we're running out of time real quick.
We're running out of time. I mean, me and you were discussing this the 9th month of 1997. You can do the calendar and look at that. We're well into 1998, and very little has changed. From a technology standpoint, every door that we open, the trap doors are worse and worse. There is not any good news. And the worst news is very little has changed as far as budgeting goes and as far as IT department's response to this problem. We've got with us Lynn Bruton, President, CEO, and consultant for CompuSoft Solutions out of Houston. We were just talking about how little has changed up to this point, Lynn, and it's surprising to all of us in IT. Give me, in your expert opinion, why are we in the state of denial that we're in IT right now?
The problem is so big, people refuse to look at it. They can't accept it. They can't swallow it. They can't deal with it. We've been lied to, just like back in Johnson's reign when we went into Vietnam. They told us, we're winning this war. We're going to win this war. We're going to win this war. And they kept sending bodies back and kept sending bodies back. And it just didn't happen. We finally ended up pulling out. And that's the same situation we're in now. No matter how many bodies we throw at this problem, it's so late in the game, it's not going to happen. We're losing this war, and we're losing it badly.
Part of the reason we're losing the war and are not prepared is that we're simply not well enough informed.
While several major television networks, magazines, and news journals have reported on the Y2K issue, most people have failed to grasp the enormity of the problem. This gigantic facility in Oregon is the site of one of the world's largest manufacturers and suppliers for technologies that require embedded computer chips. Embedded chips are microprocessors or small computers. At least 2% of all these computer chips have the Y2K virus. 2% is a substantial number when one considers that there are literally billions of chips out there. These chips are embedded in isolated devices such as cell phones, gas pumps, elevators, traffic signals, satellites, plant maintenance systems, tanks, hospital monitoring systems, and deep-sea applications, just to name a few.
Unlike mainframe, mid-range, and desktop computers, whose information and date fields can be modified, upgraded, and rewritten, microprocessing units have a different problem. The information put into those units are burned in. They're static. They cannot be modified. They have to be replaced. There are over 25 billion microprocessing embedded chips in the technologies that you've just seen. To find and replace all of these chips in the amount of time that we have left is a logistical nightmare. Compounding that fact is that the cost involved in replacing these chips is over $2 trillion. As the cracks grow and the fissures increase, high-ranking government officials are beginning to get nervous about the Y2K problem. In a recent USA Today newspaper, Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve System, made an alarming statement.
In the February 26 edition of USA Today, Alan Greenspan warned of year 2000 glitch. Washington. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan said Wednesday that the year 2000 computer bug is already hurting the economy and warned of bigger damage ahead. Inevitable difficulties are going to emerge, he said. You could end up with a very large problem. He said the Fed was ready to lend banks tens of billions of dollars if the bug causes their computers to break down in the year 2000 and they can't make payments.
There are other high-ranking officials that have become nervous as well. President Clinton has just issued special executive orders for a year 2000 council.
On February 24, 1998, President Bill Clinton made this startling announcement in special executive orders. Here is an excerpt from those orders. Minimizing the Y2K problem will require a major technological and managerial effort, and it is critical that the United States government do its part in addressing this challenge. Arthur Gross, chief spokesman for the IRS, said, "Failure to achieve compliance for the year 2000 problem will jeopardize our way of life on this planet for some time to come."
Just days after President Clinton issued his executive orders on the year 2000 commission, Arthur Gross quit his position with the IRS.
Is it merely a coincidence that the Department of Defense's acting Secretary for Command, Control, Communications, and Intelligence, who was in charge of the Y2K repairs, along with two other key officials, also resigned their post?
Thankfully, one of our most revered Christian personalities is beginning to voice his concern over the Y2K problem.
But now there is something coming. It's coming in your life. It's coming in my life. We cannot escape it. It's called, or at least many are calling it, the Millennium computer bug. And we have a man who knows a whole lot about that, and a friend of mine, I'm proud to say, Craig Smith from Swiss America Corporation in Phoenix.
Good to see you.
No stranger to TBN. Tell us about this Millennium bug. I mean, I know it has to do with computers. I know it's coming about at the very end of this millennium, and as we break through that barrier into new territory none of us has ever charted before, the next century. But they're telling us that in the year 2000, there's going to be a terrible catastrophe involving all of our computers, and this, let's face it, this world is now operated largely by computers.
Absolutely.
So please, tell us about it.
Well, you know, Pat, some people are saying that it's going to be an earthquake of a magnitude of 10. Every building's going to be leveled. We have become computer dependent in America. I mean, let's face facts. We live a very convenient life. Electricity, which is the bedrock of civilization, at least our modern civilization, runs off computers. Our power grid, which is the most efficient way in the world to use power, runs by computer.
When you say power grid, you mean in the cities and towns across the country, the electric power,
right,
gas, water power,
water, sewage
are operated by computers.
Absolutely. And you know what's amazing is most people really don't understand the effect that computers have in their lives. We are getting ready to hit a snag in the year 2000 that is going to literally shake every American's faith in a system that heavily depends upon computers.
Stock markets, for example, I've heard you talk about what would happen in the stock markets if suddenly the computers that they rely on so heavily and the banks don't show that you have anything in your account, or so much of what you believe is your assets vanish.
And I want to make it clear, banks are aggressively working on this problem, but they're not going to get it fixed in time. So that's why I believe there's going to be an earthquake.
You can almost confidently predict that though many have gone to work on it, and folks in the financial and other communities, they know that they've got to address it, and they're doing it. They just waited too late to get started. It will not. Right. We can confidently predict that there will be plenty of computers and all kinds of structure that we thought we could count on that's going to just crumple because they just can't get it fixed in time.
That's correct.
This could be setting the stage if we have real chaos, as we might, and as it looks like we will, in many ways, then the rationale would suddenly make a lot of sense to us. Well, let's have one major computer base to manage this throughout the world. We're just talking about how interrelated we are. I mean, I can see how we can be headed in that direction and how it's going to make such perfect sense to everybody.
When confidence is questioned that's when the problem ensues. And if all of a sudden my electric shuts off and my water shuts off and I can't get my money out of the bank, and some guy comes along and says, hey, I'll tell you what, we've got this other system. It's an alternative system. It'll work as good as what you were using before. All you need to do is sign up, and hey, you have it happen all the time with long distance people. I mean, everybody's got a bigger, better deal out there. And next thing you know, you've got everything that you might need to fill Bible prophecy. Clearly, Pat, in the year 2000, we are going to be inconvenienced at the best case scenario. We're going to have inconveniences.
So this is going to affect every one of us.
But let me tell you, Pat, any type of change in the economic climate as it relates to corporate profits will change Wall Street. And if that happens, it'll be too late. Better you should be a year early and be prepared for this than be 1 minute too late.
There is a terrific problem looming on our horizon. It's almost like that iceberg that the Titanic was approaching. And we are going to take a hit. We're not going to be able to go around it in many ways, and hopefully we'll figure out ways to diminish the impact. But there is going to be an impact.
What are we to make of all of these things? Are we just overreacting, or is it possible there's a bigger picture we're missing? Could these days that are just months away been foreseen by men from a long time ago who wrote them down for our benefit?
The ancient Jewish rabbis believed and taught that man would be imprisoned on the earth for 6,000 years, and then would come a seventh 1,000-year period when mankind would be released from his imprisonment. The rabbis looked at 1,000 years as a prophetic day, like days in a week. 6,000 years to them represented 6 prophetic days. The seventh 1,000 years, or the prophetic day of rest, completed a prophetic week. According to the Old Testament, from the time of Adam until the birth of Christ, there was 4,000 years, or 4 prophetic days. From Christ until the present, almost 2,000 years, or 2 prophetic days. The last 2,000 years have been the last 2 days of the prophetic week, or what some refer to as the last days. As we approach the end of the millennium, the year 2000, is it irony, coincidence, or the rabbi's prophecy coming to pass that after some 6,000 years of human history, of the successive development of building and rebuilding, of cultures, and their interlocking of the world's political, economic, and religious systems, that mankind's greatest technological accomplishment, the computer, would bring it all down in a moment of time? Look at the excerpts from this incredible section of Scripture from the 18th chapter of the book of Revelation explain this possibility. And I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. The ancient city Babylon, known for its idolatry, witchcraft, immorality, and occult practices, was destroyed long ago. But the very spirit of the ancient city Babylon has lived on. For thousands of years, like a great cloud, it has hovered over and encircled the world's empires and great cities, enveloping and seducing them into her lawless practices, like the great harlot she is. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. What empire or great city of the world doesn't have the spirit of the ancient city of Babylon? From London to Paris to Moscow to New York to Tokyo to Los Angeles, they are all drunk with the wine of her fornication. But the kings of the earth will bewail her, and the merchants will weep and mourn, and the merchants will stand far off for the fear of her torment, with weeping and wailing. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, saying, what city is like this city? Will that hour be when the clock strikes midnight, January 1, 2000?
As the truth about the Y2K problem begins to grip public officials, as it already has begun to do, will the government try to preempt potential chaotic conditions by imposing martial law and the rationing of resources? Ask yourself this question. How long will Americans be willing to do without their lifestyle before they surrender more of their freedoms for the promise of its return? All these questions lead to wild speculations, but one thing we can know for sure: it won't be long till we find out.
The stadium is empty. No one's here, no one watching, no one paying attention. It's kind of a lonely feeling. It reminds me of the masses, unaware and indifferent. But whether you know about it or not, we are running headlong into a technological hurricane. In the expanse of human history, nothing this big has been this predictable with this much precision.
What we don't know is how hard it will hit and the magnitude of devastation it will bring. Will it be like a river merely overflowing its banks, or like a tidal surge of a gigantic wave overwhelming everything in its path? Nobody knows with absolute certainty. Only time will tell. The bottom line is that while we all hope for the best, is it wise not to prepare for the worst? Think about it. The action that you take in light of this information in preparation for dealing with the Millennium bug can dramatically reduce its effect on you and your family. But you must not wait to the last minute. You must act now. And that's why we strongly urge you to obtain the Y2K Family Preparedness video series. In this video series, leading professionals such as Ed Jordan, Dr. Julian Whitaker, Dr. Barbara Fair, Rocky Cowie, one of America's leading preparedness experts, and many others teach and instruct on vital and basic preparedness issues such as water purification and storage, alternative energy resources, food storage and emergency long-term food systems, nutrition, first aid, health medical alternatives, master gardening, economic solutions and strategies, and much, much more. With this series, you can be thoroughly equipped in just 8 hours. In addition to this 8-hour preparedness series, you will also receive a 300-page National Preparedness Yellow Pages with over 3,000 vendors and suppliers of preparedness items and services. Also, we are sending you an additional copy of the widely acclaimed documentary, The Millennium Bug in the Year 2000, to share with your loved ones so they too can become aware and prepared. To order, please call the number on the screen. It's time to pay attention and get on track and get prepared. I'm Ken Klein.
And the date is not 2000. Everybody thinks the drop dead date is 2000, and it's not. We left open fields, we packed them with 9s. That's what we call it. We pack them with 9s, 9999999. When an undefinable field is out there and we don't know what date to put in it, we just pack it with 9s, which would mean that those will come into play the last month of 1988, the first month of 1999. You will have a click-over day, and you will start to see some of these systems start to have problems and crumble. We don't know. We don't really know what they'll do, but it is not 2000. And people always look and say, we got 2 years. Well, in a lot of cases, we don't have 2 years.